I think we are very fortunate that you've actually achieved a really high standard in this regard all the way through. So thank you all.
Not to hurry you up there, Member Cohen, but I just felt we were starting to get down a bit of a storyline there. Anyway, I think it goes without saying, it's been said, we really do appreciate all the work from all around. So with that in mind, it's been moved and seconded with the amendments incorporated. All those in favour? Contrary? Carried. So we'll now move on to members. You'll notice that I've requested that item 16 or item 18, depending on which report you go by, be brought forward, which is the disposal recommendation report for 2 Forest Hill Road, Forest Hill, and 1 Bath 328 Lake Road in Hauraki. And we have Pānuku Development Auckland here to speak to us. Yep, sure. Sorry, just, yep, okay. First of all,
and hard work on this issue. If we can go back, I know it's,
I think we can just tidy it up.
I know it's not normal, but
no, I appreciate that. But I think it's the professionalism, it's the hard work, but then there's also some other ingenuity, and we might just add in a whole bunch of more words there. We don't usually go that far, but we will in this instance. So thank you for that. Right, Letitia, we've got your report. Thank you, and that of Pānuku Development Auckland. We've had an opportunity to workshop it prior to this board meeting, so not directly prior, but you were there as well. So if there's anything further you'd like to update the board on, please take this opportunity. Otherwise, introduce your report and we'll move straight on to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I will just very briefly introduce Gary Jackson, who's a portfolio research analyst in my team. Gary is quite new to Auckland and is here tonight because he is seeking to gain a better understanding of the governance structure in Auckland. So I thought I'd bring him along and give him a real life example here tonight.
Isn't it nice when we use as an example, members? But anyway, very good. Letitia?
The 2 properties here, as you mentioned, we have had a workshop about them. Both properties are residual land that's left over from roading projects. The internal consultation for both properties did not identify any alternative service uses. Following the workshop with the Devonport-Takapuna local board, where the local board members requested that we investigate if they were required for park or open space purposes, I followed up with the parks team and was advised in both instances that the parks operational staff and parks policy had reviewed these sites and didn't see a need to retain them for park or open space purposes. That's the only update I have following the workshop, so happy to answer any questions.
And I think most of that was covered within the report as well, that additional comment, so I appreciate that. Look, members, I'm just going to foreshadow an intention to move the Chair's recommendations A, B and C, but I know that there will be some difference of views around that, so do I have a seconder? Seconded by Member Hale, and then we'll come back to that later on, but there are questions first. So, Member Gillen, did you have a question?
I was going to foreshadow a motion.
Right, so it's a conflicting resolution?
Would have been extremely conflicting.
Right, so we have the ability to come back to that if the resolutions are unsuccessful. So I'll keep that in mind. Question from Member Cohen. Oh, sorry, and then Member O'Connor.
I feel there's a problem in our processes because we ask parks what their opinion is. They don't necessarily talk with us, and it's a wider approach because, right, we're going to have a greater intensification, and I can't quite see where the work is being done and who's meant to be responsible, that if we have intensification in this particular area, and I'm thinking of the Forest Hill one, there are no parks or anything nearby. Now, who is meant to be contemplating that if we, and it's slated in the unitary plan, obviously when you ask parks, their first thought is, oh, it's going to cost us money to maintain it, so we don't actually want it. So there's 2 questions. You're asking perhaps not the right areas, and you're getting the wrong answers. And the other thing that I would like to know is that if it does become a reserve, do we actually have to buy the land off Auckland Transport, or does it get transferred over? I mean,
Through the chair, sorry, there were a few parts to that question, so forgive me if I don't get them all, and we'll go back to them. First of all, when we do the internal consultation process, that's done with every single council department and CCO. So we go out to all of council and all CCOs and say, these are the properties which we're rationalising. Do you have any alternative service uses for these? Now, every council department and CCO then has an opportunity to look at the properties against their plans and ascertain if they have a need to retain them. Now, in many instances, properties never even get to the local board stage because someone puts their hand up early on in the piece during that internal consultation, say that they have a need for the property, planned and funded use for it, and it gets transferred to that department. With respect to this one, nothing came up during the internal consultation, as I talked about during the workshop, but I was aware of the concerns or the request made by the local board, so I went back to the Parks policy team and asked them to liaise with Parks operations and come back with a view as to whether these properties need to be retained for Parks purposes. The advice I received was that they had been considered, but they weren't required by the Parks team. Now, Parks policy is set, and the ward councillors may be able to help me out a bit more on this because it is set independent from Panuku. It's set with the Parks policy team, and I believe, Councillor Wood, it largely goes through your regional strategy and policy committee. Parks policy. Yes. Okay.
But then what's the reporting, so that's a reporting committee, Parks Committee is a reporting committee, but where does it report to? Councillor Wood's Committee of the Whole? Yeah.
Yeah.
Land. It's not unusual for local boards to say that they want to retain the land, but you know, as you can see in the report, Panuku has a requirement to sell or dispose of land that's not required or surplus to requirements to the extent of 45 million by 30 June 2017. So, you know, this has been an ongoing thing from time immemorial, where people come up with ideas and say they want to keep land. Well, you know, quite frankly, it's part of the budget of council, and that's the reason why Panuku were given this role to cash up on these not unrequired pieces of land.
Okay, I think that was slightly wider than which committee has jurisdiction, but I appreciate the comment all the same, Councillor Wood. Thank you for the contribution. Now, further questions from Jan and Member O'Connor, and then.
At the moment, it's been a book value transfer from Auckland Transport to Auckland Council. So when the Auckland Transport Board declared it surplus, there was a book value payment made to the Auckland Transport Board. So with the expectation that because this is roading or surplus roading projects, there's usually an expectation that surplus land is sold to offset some of the costs of actually acquiring the properties. So it wouldn't be a cost as such to retain it. There wouldn't be a purchasing price, but there would be an indirect cost to council that is already paid to Auckland Transport when that book value transfer took place. There's also the ongoing operational and maintenance costs, and that does need a budget of who's going to retain that. And then there's the indirect loss to council of, as Councillor Wood just pointed out, the already planned and funded expenditure that's set out for the next 10 years in the LTP that needs to be filled to the tune of $65 million. If that $65 million is not met by council, of which we contribute approximately $45 million a year through property sales, there will either be increased rates rises to cover the shortfall, or there will be cuts in spending. And the ward councillors may wish to speak to that further. They're more aware of the wider budgets.
I think we've traversed this a number of times. It was a particularly relevant point during the long-term plan discussions. Member O'Connor.
Yeah, two questions. One is, what's the relevance of the photograph on top of 71, which isn't the way it is now? it isn't showing how much land has been taken for roading from what was there, with the houses there. What's the relevance of putting that photograph on the agenda down in Forest Hill Road?
It was simply to give you the street view of what was acquired by council. So the original parcel of land before the road widening works, the legalisation of the road widening works, which I spoke to in the report.
Now, with the recommendation, with the Chair's addition, subject to alternative open space acquisitions in this area being identified, noting that the area is not within a walking distance provision target for neighbourhood parks. How likely is Panuku to buy us a piece of park? Has Panuku actually purchased any park with any of the reserve contributions that are coming from all the subdivisions and all that's happening? There must be a lot of money around. I don't know who deals with the reserve contributions.
Just to clarify, just to clarify before, because it's in relation to my addition to the resolution. This is what I intend to be the board's feedback to is it Auckland Development Committee?
It will be going through to the Finance and Performance Committee.
So Finance Performance Committee, because my intention is that point needs to be made, that this is still an area where there needs to be greater open space acquisitions, but for quality open land, not for windswept exposed land of that nature. So just to be clear, Member O'Connor, it's not that we're asking Panuku, we're asking that the governing body, when they consider the disposal, that they also consider that there needs to be greater provision available.
That's really good consideration, considering it doesn't cost money at all. I can consider a lot of things.
Sorry, just before you do, Letitia, I think there's a further comment.
Could I just speak to that point?
Yeah.
So Panuku doesn't actually identify, and I'm slightly concerned, Mr Chair, with all due respect, about your resolution or about your proposed amendment, because we've got no jurisdiction over where parks will be acquired. That is set by Council's policy team. We would have no ability to leverage one off the other. That is set by Council's, like I said, Council's policy team, and we simply implement that. So Council's policy team do tell us when property needs to be acquired. Panuku then goes out and acquires it. Now, a lot of this is actually confidential because property acquisitions do need to be kept confidential, but I can assure you that it happens all the time. And in terms of the acquisition of property, council is always acquiring a lot more than it's actually disposing
So
of.
just to clarify in response, Letitia, if you look at the term walking distance provision target, that does come from the open space acquisitions policies, or that relation to local parks, neighbourhood parks and regional parks and everything associated with that. So in terms of the reason it's there and incorporated is it's again identifying that this is an area that's already got an identified shortfall, but realistically it's saying that we would prefer an acquisition of appropriate neighbourhood park space. So that's why that inclusion's been made. Member O'Connor.
Now, when you took the valuation, you only actually take it as what can be built there. Wouldn't it be great to have a valuation taken for environmental purposes, what the environment does when people are sitting in road rage, waiting in gridlock on the corner of Lake and Esmond, and they look out at the ambience of the little corner park. And then the next lot, bearing in mind there's 29,000 drivers a day, looking at the greenery. And it actually, does any valuation take part? Do you do as a valuer, do you value a piece of land from its environmental aspect? And also when I look at Forest Hill Road, once upon a time, before the Northern Busway came down, there used to be some open space on Westlake Girls directly across the road.
It's all asphalt now.
It's all asphalt, car park, and covered basketball courts. And what I suggested at the briefing, it would be really good for the girls from Westlake Girls to actually have a competition, to actually do a bit of landscaping. They could look after it. They haven't got any bit of greenery, but we don't take any valuations from the other point of view of the ambience of pocket parks on corners. And the fact that excuse me, Mr Chair, I haven't finished.
But it's not a question now, Member O'Connor.
But we don't do that, do we? We only take it from the built valuation of what its value is, not from a park valuation.
Through the chair, we, personally I'm not a valuer, the value I've used in here is based on the CV. We don't undertake valuations for most of the properties that we deal with until such time as we have a governing body decision. The reason for that is because we don't want to incur unnecessary costs and expenses to the ratepayers that can't be recovered through the cost of sale.
Oh, I thought you would have been a valuer.
No, I'm not a
sorry.
valuer.
No, it's all right.